What's going on, guys? Got another video here doing this time full review over a game, not just a first impression, over Hell Let Loose, a World War II tactical realistic first-person shooter game. And yeah, let's get right into it, my thoughts and what I think about the game, where it is right now, what I see for it going forward. And overall, as I gave a brief description of the game, and you can obviously see kind of just if you know what the game is, or just by looking at the main menu here, it is a tactical shooter, meaning it focuses heavily on realism, both in kind of design aspect, guns and all that, but also how the gameplay works, running, jumping, having bullets go by you or hit near you, whizzes you, and kind of like disorients you. Same for killing someone or actually shooting someone. It kills very quickly, obviously, and you don't need much to kill somebody, just like you don't in real life. Same for the injuries if you hit them in a non-vital area, obviously. And yeah, it's probably, as far as tactical shooters go in the World War II genre niche, where this is focused in, obviously, it's probably one of, if not the best example of a World War II first-person shooter that's focused on realism and tactical aspects, because first of all, there's not a lot of competition, or popular competition at any rate, that is really contending against. Obviously there's a lot of World War II shooter games, whether they're multiplayer or not, that have been done throughout history, but not all of them focus on kind of the tactical realism aspect that this game does, and not all of them have been very successful, popularity or sales-wise, or been very good. So it plays very well. It's got some really cool maps, obviously all historical. Some of the more popular ones, just if you go into ENLIST here and you go into the server browsers, you can see some of the historic maps and landmarks that you get to fight at. Obviously varying on what side or what forces you get to play as. Obviously being me who I am, the Americans are my favorite to play as, but sometimes you gotta play with the Nazis and stuff, and other forces, obviously, in World War II. There's some really cool maps. Utah Beach, obviously doing a Normandy landing, is a really cool aspect if you can get in at the start of the game where you actually land as the Allied forces. If you're German forces, it's also still cool to defend. There's also Stalingrad is in here. Is another very famous example of a battle. Omaha Beach, obviously, probably one of the most famous landing sites, if not the most famous one. Obviously, again, a lot of fun to do landings on there as the Americans. Still fun to defend again as the Germans. As you can see, the maps, the game size is also fairly big. 100 player total in the server, 50v50 matches, or ideally, that's what they should be. Sometimes it's a little unbalanced, but never too crazy. So yeah, obviously big kind of battles there, kind of like the video we did yesterday with Battle Blade Remastered. Obviously two games that focus somewhat on realism and tacticalness, but in two very different ways in different settings. Big battles though, 50v50. Honestly, I will say, just for the sheer size of the maps on Hell Let Loose, given the settings they're in, and focusing on realism and stuff, 50v50 kind of makes most of the maps seem somewhat barren, I will say. So if you're a fan of someone, again, who's an arcade shooter guy, who's a more COD run and gun guy, forced action, close quarters type of stuff, for the most part, Hell Let Loose really isn't probably what you're looking for in any regard. Most of the maps and most of your combats is usually going to be fairly spread out. It's going to be very tactical. Real combat isn't COD, most of the time at least, if you don't want to get shot. Saying this, I have no combat experience, by the way. I'm just, going off of what I know or have heard from actual people who've done this, and just some general common sense there. You also don't have jetpacks a lot of times in real combat, like in some of the COD games, but yeah, it's very slow pace for the most part. Very tactical of how you advance and move and engage in combat. You're very rarely face to face with somebody, like to the point where you could like hit them almost with like your fist or like a melee weapon, unless you're doing combat like close quarters, clearing houses in some of the city areas. And even then, a lot of that combat, there would be a lot of snipers, a lot of vehicles. You have to, it's very tactical. So, that being said, if you're not a fan of a realistic tactical shooter, something like a Tarkov, something like a Hell Let Loose right here, this probably, and you're more like a COD guy, maybe you're a Halo guy, this probably isn't what you're looking for unless you're in the market, like trying to try something out new here. That being said, it's been a lot of fun to play over the time, and hopefully, of course, keep going forward. It becomes and stays fun. Just giving a general overview of kind of like the game features and stuff. So obviously, there's a lot of different first forces here that you see in World War II: the Germans, the Soviet, the British, the United States. The four big players in World War II are all here. Doesn't really include any of the minor forces like. Some of them are obviously part, like Canada's obviously at this point still part of the British Empire. But French, obviously, given their history and what happened with them in the war, isn't included either. Even though they could have done some fairly cool battles, maybe like a Dunkirk type of thing with them, with the Germans and the French. Obviously not a massive player on a large scale with the French there. But yeah, just is what it is. The four big players are here. And yeah, you can see you have different roles within the entire unit and team here. You've got commanders who kind of are what you do exactly what you think they would do in a tactical shooter. Obviously, they have a different loadouts than your general kind of standard rifleman. That and the officers. The commander and the officers both get fully automatic weapons here. The Germans being the MP40, whereas a typical rifleman, which most people end up playing and liking. You have your pretty standard, or your standard rifles, standard issue rifles for whatever force you're playing. For this is the Kar 98K, which is a cool fact. I know I don't have my camera on, but I actually own, and I have one in the room I'm recording in over behind me here. I have a Kar 98K, Jesus. So yeah, that's pretty cool. I always like using that gun in the game just because I have shot Kar 98K in real life, so personal advantage there, right? But it's a great weapon. And it's the same for every force. You've got your Mosin for the Soviets, for the British. You've got your Lee Enfield, obviously the M1 for the Americans. And again, the Thompson machine gun, the Tommy gun is here for the it's kind of is how it is. And obviously for the assault class, you also get a submachine gun if you're a standard soldier. That's how you get access to that. The automatic rifleman, one of my favorite roles to play if you can get it. I also like the machine gunner role a lot. Obviously, the Browning for the United States, the famous MG34 for the Germans. You can eventually unlock. The what is I can't remember what that variant of the machine gun is called, but I believe it's the more famous one. So I don't know why it's escaping my head there. And every faction has their own. The Lewis gun for the British, kind of a famous one. Especially if you played any Battlefield 1, another kind of tactical game there, you might recognize a machine gun there from that if you use the light machine guns in Battlefield 1. Obviously Soviets, DP. So yeah, there's a lot of different roles here. Your commander kind of plans out battle strategy, where you guys can go. He can do in command centers. He has a lot more features, calling strikes and calling locations of enemies to some armor crews or some people who are going to call in strikes on them. So the commander is a pretty important role. You kind of have to know what you're doing in the game if you want to get that role, if you want to do well at it at least. The officer is kind of your squad lead for whatever squad you're in. It's kind of a micro role of the commander, but for your specific squad. If it's an infantry squad, obviously, and not an armor squad. Rifleman's fairly standard infantry units. For most forces here is kind of your standard GI soldier here. Assault's the kind of, as it says here, close quarters specialist, because he can get equipped with an SMG here. Same with the automatic rifleman. He kind of gets access to some of your early assault rifles here. Earlier assault rifles, obviously, the STG 44 is a pretty cutting edge weapon for when it was released. Medic, pretty self-explanatory. Your main role and what separates you is healing and reviving players. You kind of revive people in a similar way to how you would in like a Battlefield 1 game, and you can obviously heal them up. Support class is, as you can see here, if you let me turn around all the way to the back here, you've got your field telephone radio thing here. It helps with strategy. It helps with strategy and ops or in the command. You can call stuff in on it. Machine gunner, obviously pretty self-explanatory role here. Your job is to your role is to machine gun, lay down fire support, and have obviously quite a lot more firepower and ammo than most of the other roles. So you kind of just lay down cover and fire support for anybody you might need it, or obviously just kill enemies as you see them. Anti-tank, another fairly self-explanatory role here. With your well, this is the Panzerkreuz or whatever, but your bazooka if you're an American and so on. Obviously your job is to engage with and take down enemy armor. Very important role because that is not easy to do, and they're a very big problem for most of the other infantry roles. Engineer, you get another fairly self-explanatory role here. Building, repairing different fortifications and structures and armor. That's your role. Then you have your armor crew, which are separate units. The tank commander, obviously fairly self-explanatory. He gets a submachine gun for him being a commander. And he commands whatever his particular armor unit is and whatever his tank is. He's the guy kind of calling out strategy and leading the tank here. Crewman is your standard tanker. You basically you only get a pistol, unfortunately, but your job is basically run and use the tank. There's recon classes as well, spotters. You do get an SMG for this role, which is nice. Obviously, more firepower is better. You get binoculars. You kind of just go ahead of everybody, spot enemies out, what their movements are, and stuff like that. Sniper, fairly self-explanatory role here. Stay back, kind of engage from a distance, pick people off as needed, stay in a secure and hidden location. Very fun class to play there. Very annoying class to play against. And of course, there's a standard kind of domination game mode in all these maps. You kind of, depending on what forces, different zones you want to capture and maintain control of and push the enemy back. Obviously, whoever does a better job with that and maintains more zones and completely pushes out the other team wins in the 50v50 matchups. So yeah, that's a quick rundown of Hell Let Loose there. This stuff I've left out, obviously, but just a base rundown of what Hell Let Loose is and all of its stuff there. So yeah, some good things I think it does overall. Again, as I said earlier in the video, I think this is a very good example of a tactical, realistic, first-person World War II shooter. This is probably one of the best realistic, tactical FPS World War II shooters that I've ever seen or played. It's, as of now, probably one of the best on the market, if not the best on the market. It is a little pricey for some reasons I think I'll get into later, but it is on sale right now if you want to try to pick it up and play it, see if you like it. You do have 2 hours to leave and return it, obviously, on Steam. Some things about Hell Let Loose, though, that I really could praise here. The maps are amazing. Particularly what I think about, what I mean when I say the maps are amazing. It's just, the maps really make you feel like you're in World War II as much as a video game can, obviously. There's some very historic and very famous moments. The D-Day landing is probably one of my favorite moments just because it's such an iconic kind of scene and moment in history. There's also some really good units and moments there. The maps are all very well put together. The one negative I will say off of the maps and the world building, despite it being good, I think the one negative is the 50v50 game mode with 100 total players. For the map sizes of Hell Let Loose here are almost a little small, and it feels like 50v50, and that's sometimes there's not even 100 players in the servers. It depends on the server you're playing in, or if you're in a private or public thing. if it's 50v50 at the max it can be, it feels a little barren anywhere but where there isn't like, there's like usually one main area kind of in the middle of the map or at a certain objective where there's some good fighting. There's a lot of gunfire and explosions happening that really makes you sit in there. But it's a very big map, and most of the other map is kind of pretty barren most of the time when you're in a game, especially if it's not at that full capacity. And it just kind of is, how it is with that. And another thing that I'll say is kind of negative, and it's something that I'm kind of showcasing right now, is Hell Let Loose operates mainly off of this like little enlist here. This is how you matchmake with the server finder here. This is just a personal thing, not really something that's a massive negative. But for me, I've never been a fan of games who primarily use the server finder as a way to matchmake instead of just doing like something like a queue up for like a typical matchmaking like we saw in BattleBit yesterday. The reason being is when it's popular and you're trying to get into a game, it really makes it difficult to actually find a game to get into reliably, and you really have to kind of be like scalping up here, like spamming on stuff so you can get into a game. So that's just a personal thing for me. I don't really care for it too much. Overall, again, for the gameplay aspects of itself, the game plays pretty well and plays well enough as you would expect of a game like this. It's very realistic. The guns all, for the most part, are very realistic and true to their, actual real-life versions. It's very realistic in the shooting and getting shot at. It's very fun to play if that's a type of gameplay that you like, actually. So that plays very well. The tanks are really cool, and the armor, both fighting and playing in, is really fun. The flow is really good if you like tactical games. It really makes you like have to use some strategy, some smoke, some bombardments, some armor to move around, some fire suppression from the LMGs. There's some real thought into actually engaging in combat. It kind of makes it more realistic and fun to play, if that's something you like. Obviously, it's something I like occasionally, so it's something I don't have a problem with. So yeah, it's a pretty cool aspect there. The gameplay is fun, and it's good for what it is. I will say, as far as the gameplay goes, again, on the other side of that, if you're not someone who likes more of that tactical shooter, open world, or like Battlefield style kind of, you're not constantly having engagement or fighting and shooting at someone and getting shot at, you might not like it. There's a good amount of downtime sometimes in Hell Let Loose between fights, or when you're fighting. So that's something you might have to deal with there if you're not a person who cares for that too much. As again, going back, it does feel a little barren in the maps sometimes. Another big problem in this game I like to address is with the community. I've seen if you've looked at the game community in the Discord or the Steam stores, whatever store you're on, is this game recently just kind of switched developers or kind of studios who manage and produce for this game. Team 17 recently just took over for the old producers of Hell Let Loose. Team 17, obviously, a pretty storied franchise studio. If you remember, they're the ones who actually did Worms. If you remember back, that's their franchises, among others, and now to include Hell Let Loose. And it seems like it's been a very negative response from the community. If you've seen the recent reviews or just voices from the community, people do not seem to like this whatsoever. And I'm in agreement. The old development team, it wasn't as big maybe of a studio in renown as Team 17 is, but they did a very good job with Hell Let Loose. They're the ones who originally made it, obviously. And they did a good job, and they were a good team and good guys. People seemed to like them quite a bit, and they did a good job again. Team 17 so far hasn't really shown that. They are not as trustworthy. They're not as experienced with games like this, which is a big negative, especially for tactical, realistic fans, because it's a real problem because they start changing stuff that shouldn't be changed, or maybe like making stuff not as realistic as it should be. Which, from what I've gathered, the community, it seems like they might be adding in some stuff or changing some stuff that isn't exactly as realistic or, verified back in World War II as it should be to be in this game. It's kind of taking some liberties with it, and the realism and the accuracy and the historical accuracy with it, which people are going to hate knowing this community and the type of community that plays this game, overall. And another negative, the Team 17 is, we'll see what happens, but I do not have high hopes, and that is definitely something to look out for if you're considering buying this in the future, or have this and currently are thinking about refunding it. It doesn't look like it's in a great position right now, and the future looks uncertain at best, if not like the best case scenario is stagnation. So that is definitely something to consider. Another big negative, I'm sure you've seen this as I was scrolling through showing you guys the service selection when I was talking about that earlier, is, and this is something that happens with a lot of these games, if you're in this kind of like realistic or like niche kind of shooter games, like a Hold Fast or a Battle Cry Freedom type of thing, or Hell Let Loose obviously now, or even something like Ready or Not maybe. That's an early access, so it doesn't really apply as heavily. But these games, they get popular, and then they seem, and Hell Let Loose had its heyday, honestly, a little bit ago when it fully launched and kind of exploded onto the scene, especially with the first sale after launch. And it had some cool clips and everything, and people were very aware of it. But the problem with Hell Let Loose and a lot of games like this, if we ever do any of them in the future, is they kind of hit their peak, and then it's really downhill from there. It stagnates at best, but it really just slowly loses player base until you really only have, at best, a couple hundred players that are consistently playing this game. It's something like a Hold Fast Nations at War kind of situation, if you're familiar with that game. Another kind of tactical shooter based in a much different time period, though. Earlier time period as well. And that's kind of what you're seeing happening here with Hold Fast. Hold Fast has an okay population. This is new to me. I've never seen the servers quite this barren. But it's something I wasn't shocked to see, honestly, when I loaded up and to record this video. And the reason being is it had its heyday where it peaked and everything. But at a certain point with all these games, it kind of stagnates and then starts slowly dying. And obviously with the Team 17 news and the uncertainty, that really just accelerated that viciously into kind of a downward spiral cycle there. When now people are very skeptical of the game going forward. And it's a game not a lot of people are probably going to stick around for that much longer anyways. So the community is definitely in question here as far as how many players you will be able to find. I think as of now, you're not going to incredibly struggle to find people to play with, but it's going to go into that kind of mode where if you're familiar with these type of games, especially if you buy this in the future, months or years down the road, you see this video, it'll probably go into that mode where you're probably going to want to find a clan on a Discord or community forum and play private games with them against other clans and stuff, because the community matchmaking is probably going to go down. Obviously, Hell Let Loose has kind of been slowly declining over the months that it's been out, over the time it's been out, as these games tend to do. It never had a massive player base to begin with, but it just is what it is, with games like this. And with the Team 17 news combining that, it doesn't look amazing for the future of the game. So yeah, that's the big negatives in this I've mentioned here. So overall, just kind of wrapping up and giving the overall thoughts of it, there's a lot of good and bad here. There's a lot of good, bad, and ugly here, double-edged sword kind of things. This is a really niche game, and it never was anything but a niche game, honestly. Just as the genre as a whole is kind of a niche within the shooter genre. So it's really hit or miss whether you're even interested or will like a game like this in the first place. Extending off of that, the game with its recent development lead changes with Team 17, it getting a little older with a game like this. It's not in the best place right now, and the future doesn't seem amazing or as good as it could be at any rate. Overall, the positives, it still is and plays as one of the better shooters, World War II tactical realistic shooters. But then again, there's not much competition currently in the market for it, and that's kind of a good thing for Hell Let Loose, because if another fairly good competitor that filled this specific niche came along, especially with the recent news, the development change and everything, and it being an older game, by now it's probably 3 or 4 years since at least early access. It probably wouldn't be good for Hell Let Loose in the community. But overall, this is still a very okay and fun game. I just think there's a lot of question marks around it, and it's a very niche game. Personally, I've enjoyed my time playing it, but again, it's not for everyone, and it can be. It's a niche game that even I, who's someone who's a fan of the series, or fan of the type of game and the subgenre, don't really feel I play all the time or keeps my interest peaked for an immense amount of time. So overall, those are my thoughts on Hell Let Loose and review. Going into the buy recommendation, as well as the overall game score. My current buy recommendation for Hell Let Loose, given that it's on sale, but given the current state of the games and what I think about the uncertainty with the future, my buy recommendation would be hold off for now. Basically, what that's going to go into the comment section is it's going to be a skeptical buy, which I'll just kind of explain the tier systems here, because I know I've never explained kind of the rankings of the buy rates. Going from top, so the best buy recommendation you can get to the worst. The top one is a must-have. Must-have is exactly what it sounds like. It's a must-have game for you to play, regardless almost of what type of games you like. It's just a must-have game. Must-have if you like what, fill in the blank for the genre. Isn't really a rank. I'll just leave that as a comment. So it's a must-have. Then it goes to strong buy. Then it goes to buy. Then it goes from buy to kind of what is the middle ground, leaning towards the lower half of the list here with skeptical buy. Then it goes to from skeptical buy going into the bottom half of the tier where it's not a buy recommendation in any regards. It's kind of the opposite. It goes to a hold, which hold off is basically meaning I wouldn't recommend buying it right now and I'd see what happens with it. And then it goes to avoid. Avoid is a game that I would not recommend buying. Sometimes, unless it's a very specific kind of niche game and you like that stuff, but generally avoid is kind of exactly what it sounds like. Avoid the game, and it's not a good game. I wouldn't recommend buying it. So yeah, this I'll rank as a skeptical buy at the moment, kind of teetering towards the hold off on review, but skeptical buy as of now. And the game score from 0 to 10, obviously, pretty self-explanatory what that is. I'd give Hell Let Loose, as of right now, in this current state, out of 10, I'd give Hell Let Loose a 6.3 out of 10 right now. I think if you asked me about a year ago, 2 years ago, or so, what I would have given this game, it probably would have been more towards the 8.5 range, because it was a bit more popular, as well as there wasn't many question marks and everything, and it hadn't been as old, obviously. But current states and looking at what the kind of changes are to the game right now in the development team, as well as the question marks around its future, I think it knocked it down quite a bit. I think a 6.3 is a fairly generous ranking, honestly, for where this game is at right now. 6.3 out of 10. And as far as where I see that going into the future, if I ever actually touch on this video game again, I don't have high hopes for that rank going up. But a 6.3 is right now where I'd rank it, leaning towards more of a 6 and keep going lower in the future. And yeah, I'll make a final decision when I put in the description, but it's probably going to stay the same. It's not going to move too much either way. But yeah, that's where I rank it right now, 6.3 out of 10. So kind of towards the medium tier, because again, for as much as I dissed on it and gave so many question marks, it is still a fun game. It plays well. It is good at what it does as of now. I mean, it's got its perks, but it's also got a very noticeable and negligible, not negligible downsides with it, and question marks that have to be addressed. So I thought that was a somewhat fair ranking for Hell Let Loose. So yeah, that does with the video. Hope you guys enjoyed this review of Hell Let Loose. Like, subscribe, turn on notifications if you like this video and the channel's content. Everything helps. Liking, subscribing, everything helps. I really appreciate it if you want to do that. And comment down below what you think of Hell Let Loose. If you have it, what you think, if you're going to buy it or not, or just anything. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good day.